A Stuart 7A model steam plant, part 19, fitting the final parts and testing the valve gear. This is the small mounting that I made for the locking bar, and as you can see clearly it's now fixed to the special stud that I made using a 7BA nut. I'm pleased to say that the time has come to fit the drop arm in place. First of all I need to remove it, mark it with a felt tip pen and drill a hole at this point, followed by tapping the hole 6BA to take a 6BA grub screw. On larger valve gear, when I do this job, I would use a taper pin. By drilling a hole all the way through the drop arm and the reversing lever shaft, followed by using a taper reamer so that the taper pin fits firmly in the hole. But because this engine is very small, I'm going to use a grub screw. This is a special grub screw with a bit on the end that marks the metal as you tighten it up. And please note, using a grub screw on this part is not a good idea, because you cannot put sufficient pressure on the small shaft to keep it in place. I'll show you what I mean in a moment. Currently I'm reassembling the valve gear. I'm attaching the drop arm to the lifting links that move the expansion link. I'm using some thread locker on the nuts so that they don't work loose. They cannot be too tight because this would clamp the drop arm in place between the two lifting links. Here I'm checking that everything is moving freely. In this clip I'm tightening the locking bar into the fitting to hold it in place. Later on I modified this fitting. I ground off some of the lower part and fitted a lock nut to the top of the shaft. You'll see it later on in the video. The format of this video is slightly different to some of the others. First of all, I'm doing the job as you see here. Everything is fitted together and almost ready to run. Over the next few sequences I will be speaking while the engine is running. But don't worry, later on in the video there's going to be quite a lot of unaccompanied running of the engine, and my commentary will come back in at the end with some explanations. I'm really tightening this grub screw in the hole, not because I want it to bite into the shaft excessively, it's just that technically the position is perfect and I want the grub screw to make a mark on the shaft. More about that later. I connected the airline and the engine immediately burst into life. It sounds good too. Nothing's broken yet, that's always a good sign. I haven't tightened up the locking mechanism securely and here it's moving. But that's soon rectified. After I ran the engine for a while, I really did tighten the grub screw a bit more. Immediately followed by untightening the grub screw so I could withdraw the shaft. And the reversing lever shaft has been marked by the grub screw. I'm accentuating this mark with a felt tip pen. Then it's over to the drilling machine to drill a very small detent in it like this. And now when I refit the shaft and find the correct position, I can tighten the grub screw into this detent. As you can see, it's gone in a bit further. And now the drop arm cannot move. It feels very solid indeed. Time for a few fast runs. Now I'm going to slam it into forward and reverse whilst it's running. Not bad, the timing is not perfect. This is a good way to make sure it works. By insulating the engine from the soundboard, which is the top of my bench, it's a lot quieter. It's just sat on a piece of Scotch-Brite. This is just after I made the modification to the fitting that holds the locking bar, and it's allowed me to screw the locking bar through the fitting. I did this for two reasons, one being that the bottom part of the locking bar was very close to the motion at a certain point. While I'm at it, I'm just making sure that the grub screw is as tight as possible, and yes, I can get a little bit more purchase on it. This is really biting into that hole on the shaft now. I would, however, like to repeat my earlier comment that you must not use a grub screw to secure a part like this drop arm to a thin shaft. The drop arm would soon start to move on the shaft, but by drilling the detent as I showed earlier, this locks it in place. In this clip I'm oiling everything that moves, because I'm going to give the engine a long test run. If anything's going to go wrong with it, I'd rather it goes wrong with it now, whilst it's still on the bench. Now the eccentric straps have run for a while, I'm going to tighten them up. And also I'm applying quite a lot of oil around this area. The reversing mechanism still needs some more running in or breaking in. Parts of it are slightly tight, but overall the engine's in very good fettle. As I'm going to bench run the engine for a prolonged period using compressed air, I'm over-oiling all of the moving parts, especially the trunk guide, the small end, and of course the big end of the connecting rod. And for this I'm using my normal lubricating oil, which as I've mentioned previously I get from a company called Hallett Oils. Let the testing begin. Cylinder lubrication is essential. A good squirt of steam oil into the airline fitting will lubricate the cylinder for quite a long time. This is known as notching up. You move the reversing lever back towards neutral. That limits the valve travel and uses less steam. And this engine notches back almost to the centre at both ends. That's a good sign. In this clip, as you can see with the engine notched up, it changes the position of the eccentric rod relative to the valve fork. Now for a bit of slow motion. The engine is running in or breaking in quite nicely. It's starting to sound a lot smoother. The oil is not as black as it once was, but either way it's a good idea to wipe all this stuff off before re-lubricating all the parts. I've put the engine back on the piece of Scotch-Brite to cancel the soundboard effect. I intend to fit a nut on top of the locking bar, but not a full-size nut, that looks wrong. I machined away over half of the nut in the lathe, and now this is what it looks like. And here I'm refitting the 7BA nut with a washer. If anything, the reversing lever is going just slightly too high, but this is in reverse anyway. Generally speaking, forward is down. The reason for this being, if ever the linkage broke, it would fall to the bottom and at least the engine would run forwards. And that is it for this longer than normal episode. Stay safe, stay well, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website. Click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you will find it very easy to find other videos that you may like to watch.